My name is Emily Wilkins. I was 6 years old when my mother turned to me, red-eyed and hollow, and said, "You'll be better off in state care." Then she left me behind like forgotten luggage. But 18 years later, I stood in a courtroom, facing her and my father, those same people who vanished without a goodbye, and I said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "You forfeited your role the day you left me at that orphanage." Then I signed the final papers and walked out, leaving them nothing. Not a cent. Before I take you back to the moment it all began, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for the family you deserve, not the one you were born into, you might want to hear how this all unfolded. Cincinnati winters have this particular kind of stillness, like the world itself is holding its breath. That night, I remember the wallpaper peeling from the corners of the overheated living room, the radiator clanging like a distant warning bell, and my father pacing, pacing, pacing. I was sitting on the frayed carpet with my knees pulled to my chest, watching from the corner like a ghost. My name is Emily Wilkins, and I was 6 years old the last time I saw my parents as anything resembling a couple, maybe even as people. "You always do this," my mother screamed, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Run away when things get hard, run straight into her arms." "She actually listens to me," my father shouted back, grabbing his faded leather jacket off the hook by the door. "You're poison, Angela, I can't breathe around you." The name Angela barely meant anything to me then. To me, she was just Mom, except not the kind that kisses skinned knees or tells bedtime stories. She was the kind that smoked in the kitchen and never looked at you long enough to see the bruise she caused. "Then go," she barked, voice rising like it always did when the door was involved. "Go to your slut, I'm done pretending this is a family." My father yanked open the door, the cold night air rushing in, swirling snow into the cramped space like a spell had just been broken. He looked at me for half a second, just a flick of the eyes, not enough to register anything real. "I'm done," he muttered, and then he was gone. The door slammed shut so hard it shook dust from the ceiling. And then silence. Until she turned to me. Her eyes were swollen, her mascara smudged and uneven, but her mouth was still set in that bitter line she wore like lipstick. "You'll be better off in state care," she said coldly. "At least they feed you on time. At 6, you don't really process betrayal, you just feel it. It doesn't arrive in big philosophical thoughts. It shows up in the way your heart thumps wildly when your mother grabs your coat from the closet and tosses it at you without a word. No explanation. No goodbye. I remember the orphanage doors, big, metal, and gray, creaking open as we walked up the steps. The woman who answered had kind eyes and a clipboard, but I didn't care about kind eyes. I was watching the snow fall behind my mother's head, hoping she'd change her mind. She didn't even kiss me on the forehead. Just signed a few papers, turned on her heel, and left. And I stood there with my too big coat slipping off one shoulder, clutching my tattered teddy bear, wondering if this was what it felt like to die without dying. The room they gave me was dim and smelled like bleach. My bed had a thin mattress and a metal frame that groaned every time I moved. That first night, the girl in the bunk above me whispered, "New girl, huh, hope you don't cry. Crying gets you punched." I didn't cry, not once. But I listened. I listened to every rustle in the dark, every whisper from kids who'd been left just like me. I learned quickly that being invisible was safer than being noticed. I didn't understand why they'd done it, my parents. What had I done to make them leave me? Had I talked too much? Had I cried too often? Had I not been enough? Questions that would live in my bones for years. The orphanage was loud in all the wrong ways. Kids yelling, crying, arguing over toys that were already broken. But the worst sounds weren't the loud ones. They were the whispers behind your back, the silent looks, the knowing laughter when someone tripped or got their tray knocked over. I didn't speak much during those first weeks. My voice felt locked inside me, like if I opened my mouth, the truth of what had happened would spill out and make it all too real. So I stayed quiet, invisible, easy target. Foster girls got baby hands. One boy snickered behind me in line for lunch. "Bet she still wets the bed." I didn't, but denying it wouldn't help. That was the rule here, defend yourself and you just painted a bigger target. Someone kicked the back of my leg that day. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to sting. The teddy bear I brought with me, his name was Benny, was missing by week 2. I found him 3 days later stuffed into a toilet. His face soaked, one eye gone. That night, I pressed the wet fabric against my chest and didn't sleep at all. I knew I wasn't supposed to keep things. "Nothing stayed yours in here." but Benny had been mine before everything fell apart, before the snow and the slammed door and the silence. I buried him under my mattress and pretended he was safe again. It rained the day they came. I remember the smell of it, wet pavement, mud, and something warm baking in the kitchen. Maybe cornbread. Or maybe my mind invented that detail later, just to make the memory sweeter. All I know is, I was kneeling on the floor, tying the shoe of a younger girl named Kayla. She was 5, couldn't get the loop right, and started crying in frustration. Like bunny ears, I whispered, showing her slowly. You just have to be patient with your fingers. She nodded, wide-eyed, sniffling. I tightened the laces gently and gave her a tiny smile. She smiled back. That's when I felt eyes on me. I looked up. A woman and a man stood near the doorway, speaking softly to the caseworker. The woman had soft curls pulled into a bun, a raincoat folded over her arm, and eyes that reminded me of sunlight through clouds. The man was taller, broad-shouldered, with hands clasped tightly in front of him and a kindness in the way he nodded when he saw me. They didn't smile big or wave like some of the other visiting couples did. No exaggerated excitement. Just attention. Real attention. They watched me help Kayla tie her shoes and didn't look away. Later that evening, after dinner, I was called to the small office near the back hall. They want to meet you, the caseworker said gently, smoothing her blouse. But only if you're comfortable, okay? I nodded. Not because I understood what it meant, but because saying no felt impossible. When I walked in, the woman knelt down to my level. Hi, Emily, she said softly. I'm Linda, and this is Gary. Hi, Gary said, voice calm and low. We heard you're really good at tying shoelaces. That made my lips twitch, just a little. Linda smiled like that was the most beautiful thing in the world. We just wanted to talk, she continued, no pressure, we're just hoping to get to know you a little. Most adults talk too fast, too loud, but Linda spoke like time didn't matter, like my answers were worth waiting for. They asked about school, what foods I liked, if I had any favorite animals. Dogs, I whispered eventually. Golden retrievers. Gary smiled. I grew up with one named Sammy, big goofball, he used to steal socks out of the laundry basket. I nodded slowly, picturing it. Linda leaned in. Would you want to meet one sometime? Something fluttered in my chest. Hope maybe, but I wasn't ready to trust it, not yet. Still, I said, maybe. And they didn't push, they just said it was nice meeting me and they hoped we could talk again. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't cry into my pillow. I didn't believe anything yet. But I'd felt something during that visit, something that felt like being seen. Not stared at, not judged, seen, like I mattered. I didn't know then that Linda and Gary would come back every week, that they'd sit through paperwork and interviews and meetings with social workers just to make space in their lives for me. I didn't know they'd buy lavender paint or teach me how to ride a bike. That's all still ahead in the story. But what I do know is this, that rainy afternoon in the orphanage changed everything. Because it was the first time I felt wanted. There's a moment I remember so clearly, it plays in my mind like film. The day I stepped into what would become my new home, Linda turned to me in the hallway and said, "This room is all yours, sweetheart. You can close the door whenever you want." It sounds simple. But after nearly a year of sleeping with my shoes on in case I had to run or waking up to find my pillow missing because someone else claimed it, the idea of closing a door, my door, felt almost unreal. I looked up at her unsure. Even if I don't want to talk. Especially then, she said, kneeling so we were eye level. Your space is yours, you don't owe anyone a smile. Then she stood and pushed the door open. Lavender. Soft, sweet lavender. The walls were painted a gentle pastel, not the cold institutional beige I'd grown used to. A white bookshelf stood in the corner, half filled with picture books and stuffed animals. A plush rug, the color of oatmeal, lay under the twin bed, my bed, with a quilt that looked handmade, soft, and inviting. It didn't look like a bedroom in a catalog. It looked like someone had cared, and I didn't know what to do with that feeling. The first few nights, I barely slept. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't know how to be safe. My ears were tuned to the creak of stairs, the click of doors, footsteps in the hallway, old instincts. Linda started leaving a nightlight on, not shaped like a moon or a cartoon character, but a little ceramic lamp that glowed warm and golden. Just in case you want to see where you are, she said. It helped me when I was a kid. I didn't ask why she needed a nightlight once. That felt too personal. But I wondered. Gary was quieter, he didn't push, didn't overdo the dad jokes or try to hug me too soon. But every morning he'd be at the kitchen counter making waffles, humming something low and tuneless. The first time I accidentally spilled syrup on the floor, I froze. My hands trembled as I reached for the paper towels. "I'm sorry. Don't worry about it, kiddo," Gary said calmly. "Means you're enjoying breakfast." Then he tossed me a damp rag and winked. We cleaned it up together. That was the first time I laughed. There was a golden retriever named Charlie, big, clumsy, and too affectionate for his own good. The second I stepped into the yard, he barreled into me like I was his long-lost littermate. I shrieked, not in fear but surprise. Gary came running out, yelling, "Charlie, you goofball, she's not a bowling pin." But I was already laughing again, for real this time, even as I sat in the grass with dog hair in my mouth. Charlie licked my face like he'd known me forever. I guess, in some strange way, we both knew what it felt like to be left behind. School was harder. Not the grades, I was always good at learning. That was my quiet escape. But kids don't understand adoption, or maybe they do and that's worse. "Your real mom didn't want you," one boy asked at recess, scrunching his nose. "Guess they gave her back," another muttered under his breath. I didn't cry, not at school. But I started coming home with clenched fists and chewed-up pencil tops. Linda noticed right away. "You want to talk about it?" she asked. "No," I muttered. "Okay," she said simply. "But if you change your mind, I'll be right here. And if you don't want to talk but just want to sit next to someone, I'm here for that too." She didn't push, she didn't hover, she just showed up every single day. It was that consistency, that quiet kind of love, that started to wear down the walls I'd built so high around myself. One afternoon, Gary handed me a pair of training wheels and pointed to a shiny red bike leaning against the garage wall. "You ready?" he asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. He didn't hold the seat the whole time. He let me fall. Twice. But he also taught me how to get back up. How to laugh at a scraped knee. How to be proud of wobbly progress. When I finally made it to the end of the driveway and turned without tipping over, Linda clapped like I'd won gold at the Olympics. "Dinner's ready, speed racer," she called. "Better race back before the chicken gets cold." That night I ate 2 helpings and fell asleep with the taste of freedom still lingering in my mouth. It didn't happen all at once, but over time I started to believe that maybe this wasn't temporary. That maybe I wasn't just a visitor in someone else's story. I was part of this one. I had a room, a dog, a family, not perfect, not shiny, but real. And for the first time in my life, I let myself hope. It was the kind of day that felt too perfect to mess with. Late May in Ohio, warm sun on skin, laughter spilling across the backyard, and balloons tangled up in the wind like they didn't want to let go. "We're so proud of you, Emily." The banner stretched from fence post to fence post, swaying gently above the crowd. My high school graduation party. Linda had made the cake herself, lemon with cream cheese frosting, and Gary had grilled enough burgers to feed a football team. And there I was, in the center of it, smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. People kept coming up to shake my hand, hug me, offer stories about how far I'd come. "Honor roll, track captain, full scholarship to college, you're a miracle, sweetheart," said our neighbor Mrs. Grayson, pinching my arm with watery eyes. "Your parents must be bursting." And Linda, standing just behind me, placed her hand softly on my back and said, "We are. Not adoptive parents. Not foster, just parents." It should have been the happiest day of my life. And in many ways it was. Until the envelope showed up. It was Gary who found it first. Tucked in among the stack of cards next to the gift table, unassuming and plain. Cream-colored, with a thick red wax seal on the back like something out of an old movie. No decoration, no glitter, no return address. Just my name. Emily Wilkins, no middle name, no mention of Linda or Gary. I noticed his brows furrow as he turned it over in his hands. "You know who this is from?" he asked, passing it to me. I shook my head. It was heavier than a card, thicker paper. Something about it made my fingers tingle. I cracked the seal. Inside was a legal-looking document and a smaller handwritten note. The official part was from a law office in Lexington, Kentucky. I skimmed the words, last will and testament, named beneficiary, date of execution. My eyes snagged on one name in particular. Martha Wilkins. I blinked. "Who's Martha Wilkins?" Gary looked confused. "Doesn't ring a bell." Linda stepped closer, gently taking the letter from my hand to read it for herself. "Emily," she said slowly, her voice thinner than usual. "This says she was your grandmother, your biological father's mother." I felt the air shift around me. Like the sun just took a step back. My grandmother, I never knew I had one. The handwritten note was brief, just 5 lines. Emily, I have searched for you every year since that winter. I wanted you to know I never agreed with what they did. I tried, I was blocked, but I never stopped loving you. Martha, I didn't realize I was crying until the ink on the note blurred from the drops. That night after the last guest left and the balloons were deflated and crumpled in a trash bag, I sat on the porch with Linda, the will and letter resting between us like a fragile secret. She left me something, I whispered. Linda nodded. The letter said the estate is significant. But why now? I asked. Why didn't she ever come for me? Why didn't I ever hear from her? She was quiet for a moment. It sounds like she tried. Some people in your birth family. They might have made it hard for her. I didn't ask who, I already knew. Angela and Mark, my birth parents. I hadn't seen them in 12 years. I hadn't even said their names aloud in just as long, but something in that letter cracked open a door I didn't realize was still locked inside me. They'd taken everything from me once. And now this, why now? I want to go, I said softly. To the reading, to see what this is. Linda didn't hesitate. We'll go with you. Even if it means seeing them again. She took my hand, squeezing it gently. You're not facing this alone, not ever again. And just like that, the next chapter of my life had already begun, sitting on a porch swing in suburban Ohio, holding the last letter from a grandmother I never knew, wondering why the people who abandoned me were about to walk back into my life. The law office was nothing like I expected. No marble columns, no intimidating boardroom. Just an elegant 2-story building tucked between an antique bookstore and a florist in the historic district of Lexington, Kentucky. The kind of place that smelled like lemon polish and paper older than me. Linda squeezed my hand as we stepped through the wooden door. Gary held it open behind us, scanning the hallway like he was ready to block anyone who looked at me sideways. The receptionist stood as we approached. You must be Emily Wilkins, she said kindly, as if saying the name didn't split it in half before and after. Yes, I replied, barely above a whisper. They're already here, she said, then tilted her head toward the waiting room. The attorney will call you in shortly. And that's when I saw them. I recognized Mark first. He was leaning against the window, arms crossed, staring at nothing. His once dark hair was thinning, grayer around the ears, and his frame was slighter than I remembered, like life had worn him down at the edges. Angela sat in the corner, flipping through a magazine she clearly wasn't reading. Her blonde hair, once pulled into harsh ponytails I feared, was now cropped short and styled, her makeup perfectly done, lips red as wine. She looked like someone who hadn't been to an orphanage in her life. They didn't see me at first. In that moment, I saw them not as ghosts or monsters, but as strangers. Just two people who once made a decision they thought they'd never have to answer for. When Mark looked up and saw me, he flinched. Not dramatically. Just this small, involuntary jerk of the shoulder like someone catching sight of a mirror they hadn't meant to walk past. Angela followed his gaze. Her eyes locked onto mine. And for a beat too long, no one said anything. Then, Emily, she breathed, standing slowly. Look at you. Like I was a cake that had turned out better than expected. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't speak. Gary stepped subtly in front of me, but I placed a hand on his arm. It's okay, I said quietly. I want to hear what they'll say. Angela stepped forward like she thought this might be some reunion. We've wanted to see you for so long. Mark added quickly, you've grown into such a beautiful young woman. I let that sit in the air between us like smoke. You don't get to say that, I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. You left me. Angela's smile faltered. It wasn't that simple. You dropped me off like I was nothing, I said. Do you even remember what you said to me that night? Mark looked down. Angela blinked slowly like she was trying to pull the memory out of fog. You said I'd be better off in state care, I continued. And you didn't even say goodbye. Her lips parted. No words came out. Linda stepped beside me then, her presence grounding me. You don't owe them a conversation, Emily. But I did. I needed it not for them but for me, so I looked them in the eyes and asked the one question that had haunted me for years. Why? Angela's eyes flickered. We were young. We didn't have the money. Your father was leaving. No, I interrupted. Don't blame him. You were there. You looked at me and said it, so just say the truth. Angela's red lips pressed together. Then, barely audible, I didn't know how to be a mother. Mark added, we thought someone else could do better. You were right, I said coldly. Someone else did. The door opened then, and a tall man in a navy suit appeared. "Emily Wilkins?" he asked, glancing at a clipboard. "I'm Mr. Harrington, we're ready for you." I turned without another word and followed him, Linda and Gary close behind me. As we stepped into the conference room, the weight in my chest didn't disappear, but it shifted. I had looked them in the eye. I hadn't crumbled. I wasn't the scared girl in the orphanage anymore. And whatever this will said, whatever this grandmother had left me, it couldn't change the past. But it might just rewrite my future. The conference room was lined with heavy wood paneling and smelled faintly of leather and old secrets. A long oval table sat in the middle, polished to a mirror shine. I caught my reflection in it, nervous eyes, clenched jaw, shoulders too tense for someone barely 18. Mr. Harrington motioned for us to sit. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Wilkins," he said as he opened a thick folder stamped with the Wilkins family seal. The seriousness in his voice made my palms sweat. Angela and Mark entered quietly behind us, taking seats across the table. No more smiles, no fake pleasantries, just silence and stiff postures, like they already suspected they were about to hear something they wouldn't like. I didn't look at them. I stared at the folder. "This is the official last will and testament of Martha Lorraine Wilkins," Mr. Harrington began. "Dated and notarized 2 months before her passing. She was of sound mind, under no duress, and made her intentions abundantly clear." My throat tightened. I had no memories of this woman, and yet her name echoed in my chest like something sacred. The attorney continued, flipping through pages with precise fingers. "There is one primary beneficiary, Miss Emily Wilkins." I blinked. "Wait, only me." He nodded. "Correct. Ms. Wilkins' entire estate, valued at approximately $2.9 million including real estate, savings, and personal assets, is to be transferred in full to Emily Wilkins upon the reading of this will." Linda reached for my hand under the table. I didn't realize I was shaking until I felt her fingers steady mine. Angela shifted in her seat. "That doesn't make sense," she said, voice tight. "There must be a mistake. We're her children." Mr. Harrington didn't flinch. "Ms. Wilkins had the legal right to distribute her estate as she saw fit. This decision was intentional, documented, and reaffirmed multiple times." Mark leaned forward. "But why her?" He didn't look at me when he said it. "She barely even knew her." That's when Mr. Harrington pulled out a second envelope, this one smaller, aged, and sealed with a faded rose-colored stamp. "A letter," he said, placing it gently in front of me. "Your grandmother wrote it to accompany the will. It's meant for your eyes only." My fingers trembled as I took it. The paper was soft, the kind that folds memories into every crease. I opened it. "My dearest Emily, I have lived many years with the weight of losing you. I did not give up trying to find you, but my efforts were blocked at every turn, by people I trusted, by systems I couldn't fight. I begged your parents to tell me where you were. They refused. I went to the orphanage twice. They turned me away without a name. I wrote letters every Christmas that never got replies. I wanted you to have something when I was gone, something to remind you that not everyone turned their back on you. You were loved, even when you couldn't see it. And now this is yours, not because of obligation, but because of justice. Make a life that's your own, darling girl, one full of warmth and truth. Love always, Martha." I swallowed hard, the room going blurry as I traced her name with my thumb. I couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. Gary rubbed my back gently. Linda wiped her eyes. Angela broke the silence. "You can't be serious. She was a child. She didn't know what she was doing." "She knew enough to walk away," I snapped, finally turning to face her. "And Grandma knew enough to try to fix what you broke." Mark's jaw tensed. "You're telling me we get nothing, after everything?" I narrowed my eyes. "What everything? You weren't there for the bruises, or the nightmares. Or the nights I cried myself to sleep in a room full of strangers." Angela's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't trust them. "You blocked her," I said. "You stopped her from finding me. She could have saved me, but you wanted to disappear clean, no complications, no guilt." I stood slowly. "You don't get to come back now just because I'm worth something." Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. "If there are no legal objections, we'll proceed with the formal transfer documents next week. The estate is uncontested under Kentucky law." Mark and Angela didn't speak. They couldn't, because for the first time I had more power than they did, and I wasn't going to waste it. The lawyer told us the will was airtight, but I knew it wasn't over. People like Angela and Mark, they don't walk away quietly. Not when money's involved. So when I got the message a day later, through Mr. Harrington, no less, that they wanted to speak with me civilly, I agreed. Not for them, for closure. Linda and Gary offered to come, but I needed to face this alone. Not as a frightened little girl clutching a teddy bear, but as the woman who now had her name on the deed to a legacy they tried to erase. We met at a small cafe down the street from the law office. Quaint, with checkered tablecloths and framed black and white photos on the walls. The kind of place that tried to feel like home. They were already there when I arrived. Angela wore pearl earrings and a soft pink blouse, the kind meant to make her look maternal. Mark had on a button-down and a tired face. 2 lattes sat untouched between them. Angela stood when she saw me. Emily, she breathed like it was a prayer. I didn't hug her, didn't offer a smile, I sat. Thank you for coming, Mark said carefully. I folded my hands. Get to it. Angela blinked. You have every right to be angry. You're not here for my feelings, I interrupted. You're here because you want something, she hesitated. We wanted to explain. No, I said calmly. You wanted to justify. Mark leaned in, lowering his voice. We didn't stop loving you, Emily. You abandoned me. Angela's lips trembled. I was drowning, your father had left, I had no job, no family support. I thought you'd have a better chance, with strangers. With anyone who wasn't me, she said. I didn't trust myself, I was scared I'd ruin you. You already had, I whispered. Mark rubbed his face. We were selfish, we were cowards. It wasn't the confession I expected, not exactly, but it didn't bring comfort, because then Angela leaned forward, voice soft, rehearsed. But we've changed. We've built better lives, we've been sober for years, we go to church, we help run a youth shelter. I held up my hand. Please don't parade your redemption arc in front of me, that's not why I'm here. Mark sighed. Only that inheritance, and there it was, the real reason. Angela's face tightened. We're not asking for everything, just something, a share. We're your parents. You were, I cut in, for 6 years. We lost our daughter, she said, her voice trembling. We live with that every day. I looked at her, at the way her fingers curled around the edge of the napkin like she needed to feel control over something. You didn't lose me, I said. You left me. The words landed between us like a slap. Mark swallowed hard. So this is punishment. No, this is consequence. Angela's eyes filled, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't there to heal her, I stood up. You don't want me, you want the money, and you're right, I'm not the same little girl you left behind. I leaned down, just enough for them to see the woman I'd become. She would have cried, I said. I'm not crying. And then I walked out. The letter came in a thick, white envelope, the kind you never want to see addressed to your name. It was resting on our kitchen counter when I came home. Linda had set it there gently, unopened. Her expression was tight but calm, like she was already trying to brace me for whatever storm was inside. What is it? I asked, setting down my keys. From a law firm, she said softly. Lexington address, their names are on the return label. I didn't have to ask who they were. I tore it open, hands suddenly shaking. The paper inside was stiff, the words cold and clinical. Notice of petition to reclaim partial inheritance due to familial rights and shared suffering. My eyes skimmed the page. Angela and Mark were suing me. They were actually suing me for a portion of my grandmother's estate. The same estate they'd actively worked to keep me from. The same woman they shut out of my life. Gary stepped beside me, reading over my shoulder. They're claiming emotional damage from separation. That they suffered the loss of a daughter. I stared at the words like they were written in a language I no longer understood. Linda sat down across from me, her voice gentle but steady. They're trying to reframe what happened. They're hoping a court will pity them. They left me, I whispered. They left me, and now they want to be compensated for it. No one spoke. Not because they didn't know what to say, because there was nothing to say. That night I sat on the back porch alone, knees pulled to my chest, trying to remember how to breathe through the weight of it all. They hadn't just betrayed me once. They were choosing to do it again, on purpose. After hearing what I went through, after reading my grandmother's words, after watching me hold back tears in that cafe, they still wanted to take something from me. And I hated that it worked, that it got in my head, that it made me feel hollow all over again. Like I was back at the orphanage, staring out the window, wondering if someone might still come for me. Linda found me out there an hour later. She sat beside me without saying a word for a long time, just the sound of crickets, wind, and my heart breaking quietly in my chest. They don't want me, I said eventually. They want the money. She didn't correct me, because we both knew it was true. I turned to her, tears finally spilling over. Why isn't that enough to make them stop? Her arms wrapped around me, steady and warm. Because some people confuse guilt with entitlement, she said softly. They think pain, any pain, gives them the right to take, even if they caused it. The next day, our lawyer reviewed the petition. It won't stand, he assured us. The will is clear, they are not listed, and familial suffering is not a recognized basis for inheritance challenge in the state. But I still couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, because it wasn't about the money. It was about the message they were sending. They didn't regret what they did. They regretted missing out on what I became. They didn't come back for me. They came back for what I had. And something inside me hardened that day. Not in a cruel way, but in a way that finally understood the difference between forgiveness and boundaries. Courtrooms aren't like the movies. There's no dramatic music. No thunderstorm outside. Just carpet that smells like old coffee, dull fluorescent lighting, and people in suits trying to sound calm while everything inside you screams. I stood outside the mediation room in Lexington, smoothing the creases from my dress that I'd ironed 3 times that morning. Linda was beside me, holding a small bottle of water, and watching me like she was ready to catch me if I fell. Gary sat on the bench down the hall, flipping through a magazine he wasn't reading. They don't deserve your energy, Linda said quietly. But if you need to say something today, say it all. I nodded. I didn't want to speak out of rage. I wanted to speak out of truth. The mediator introduced herself inside, an older woman with glasses and a tired but kind expression. She explained the rules of the proceeding. Civil tone, no direct interruptions. We were here to mediate, not litigate. Angela and Mark sat across the table, flanked by their attorney. He looked sharp and confident, the kind of man used to spinning stories. Mark wore a gray blazer I didn't recognize. Angela was dressed in soft blue again, like she was playing the part of a mother at a school function. Their lawyer started first, launching into a prepared statement. While my clients acknowledge past mistakes, they maintain that the emotional loss of their daughter caused lifelong pain and financial hardship. This petition is not about greed. It is about restoration, about acknowledging shared suffering and shared suffering. I cut in, unable to stop myself. They left me. The mediator gently held up her hand. Ms. Wilkins, you'll have a chance to respond. Please wait until your turn. I swallowed it down. The lawyer kept talking. He spoke of poverty, of depression, of substance struggles. He painted them as broken people who'd lost a child and had found their way back only to be shut out. Angela dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Mark nodded solemnly at all the right moments. It was a performance, and for a moment I almost believed the room was buying it, until the mediator turned to me. Ms. Wilkins, you may respond. I stood. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts, but I remembered what Linda said, say it all. I was 6, I began, my voice quieter than I expected. 6 years old when my mother looked at me and said I'd be better off in state care. My father left that night. My mother signed papers. Neither said goodbye. Angela looked away. They didn't come back, not once. No birthday cards, no phone calls, no attempt to find out where I was. I spent my 7th birthday in an orphanage eating vending machine cookies. Mark's face twitched. I was adopted by strangers who loved me like their own from day one. They showed up. They stayed. They earned the title of parents not through biology but through presence. I looked straight at Angela then. You blocked my grandmother from finding me. You kept her away, and now you want what she left me. But love isn't a transaction. It's not something you get to cash in on just because you regret walking away. I turned to the mediator. They forfeited their role, they forfeited their rights, and they don't get to rewrite the story now that there's money involved. Silence. The kind that speaks volumes. The kind that tells you you've just pulled the curtain back and no one can pretend anymore. The mediator nodded. Thank you, Ms. Wilkins. I sat down, heart still racing, but lighter somehow, like I'd finally closed a chapter that was never mine to carry. Outside, on the courthouse steps, I looked up at the sky. No storm, no drama, just sunlight breaking through. Linda and Gary joined me, their hands warm on my back. You did it, Linda whispered. No, I said, smiling softly. We did. The decision came the next morning. I hadn't even gotten out of bed when the phone rang. Gary answered it in the hallway, and I listened as his footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. When he opened my door, he didn't say anything right away. He just gave me that soft smile he always wore when he was trying not to make a big deal out of something enormous. It's over, he said. I sat up slowly. What do you mean? The petition was dismissed, fully. The court ruled in your favor, no mediation required. they won't be getting a dime. It should have felt like victory. It did. But not in the triumphant, movie scene kind of way. No champagne, no dancing in the living room, just relief, bone-deep, soul-quieting relief. They can't touch it? I asked just to be sure. Gary shook his head. Not legally. It's done, done. A single word, but it echoed in my chest like a prayer finally answered. I stepped out onto the porch with my tea, the morning air cool against my skin. Linda joined me a few minutes later, still in her robe, carrying a plate of toast like this was any other Tuesday, but it wasn't. I didn't expect to feel so empty, I admitted, staring out at the quiet street. Is that weird? She shook her head. Not at all. When you've carried a weight for that long, putting it down doesn't feel like celebration. It feels like silence. I nodded. I'm not angry anymore, just tired. Linda looked at me for a long moment. So what now? I knew the answer before she finished asking. I was going to Martha's lake house. It was about a 2-hour drive, winding through stretches of forest and the kind of small towns where the gas station also sells bait and hot dogs. The lake house had been part of the estate, untouched for years, nestled between tall pines and silence. The moment I stepped out of the car and saw it, weathered wood siding, porch swing creaking in the breeze, I felt her. My grandmother, a woman I'd never hugged, never heard laugh, but someone who had carried me in her heart for decades. Inside, the house was quiet, dusty, sure, but not forgotten, like it had simply been waiting for someone to come home. I opened all the windows, let the sunlight spill in. I ran my fingers over the worn countertops, opened creaky cabinet doors, peeked into closets that still held her cardigans and books that smelled like old stories. And then I walked out to the dock. The lake was still, a mirror of sky. I pulled the letter from my coat pocket, the one Martha had written to me, the one I'd folded and unfolded 100 times since the reading. I sat at the edge of the dock and read it out loud. Not because she was there, but because I was, her words, carried by the wind. You were loved even when you couldn't see it, my voice cracked. I let it. I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't abandoned. I wasn't unwanted. I was chosen, by Linda, by Gary, and in her own quiet way by Martha. When I finished, I stood, pulled a small bouquet of wildflowers from my bag, and laid them gently on the water's surface. They drifted slowly, catching light like glass. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Linda, she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Your grandmother would be proud, she said after a moment. You chose the right kind of legacy. And I believed her. 10 years later, I still think about that moment on the dock. Not every day, not like before. But sometimes, when I'm sitting alone after a long session, or when the light catches the lake house photo on my desk just right, I remember what it felt like to say goodbye to someone I never got to meet, and still feel completely known by her. My name is Dr. Emily Wilkins now. Family therapist, licensed trauma counselor, and depending on the day, unofficial big sister to a dozen kids who think the world gave up on them. It's funny, the way pain makes space for purpose. I used to think I'd have to forget where I came from to build a better life. Now I know the opposite is true. I found my strength because I remember it all. The lavender room, the nightlight, the syrup on the floor and Linda saying it was fine. The way Gary clapped louder than anyone at my graduation. I've carried those moments with me into every corner of my practice. There's a foster girl who only speaks when the room is completely dark. A 12-year-old boy who pretends he hates everyone but always sits a little closer to the door after our sessions, just in case I leave. A teenager who's aging out of the system next month and can't decide if she wants to run or fight. I see them all. Because once someone saw me. My office isn't fancy. A second-hand bookshelf, a couch that sags in the middle, a diffuser that smells like eucalyptus and faintly like crayons, no matter what I do. But it's mine. Every inch of it. And on the desk, right where the sunlight hits around 3 p.m. each day, sits a photo in a simple silver frame. Me, standing barefoot at the lake house dock, Linda and Gary beside me, all three of us laughing at something the camera didn't catch. A willow tree arcs behind us, leaves swaying like they know all the secrets. In the corner of the photo is the small wooden plaque Gary nailed to the porch the summer we restored the house. Family is who shows up and stays. I had it etched onto the frame. Every so often, a client glances at the photo. Is that your family? They ask. Yes, I always answer. No long explanation. No disclaimers about adoption or bloodlines or lost years, because love doesn't need a footnote. Sometimes I go back to the lake house alone. I keep it up now, fixed the foundation, repainted the siding, even turned Martha's old sewing room into a writing space. There's a hammock out back and wind chimes that tangle in the pine trees. It's quiet there. Healing has a sound when you finally learn to listen for it. A few years ago, I hosted a retreat there for teens aging out of foster care. We grilled hot dogs, made friendship bracelets, and sat around a bonfire while one kid asked, "Do you think people can change?" Everyone went quiet. Then I said the truth. Some people do, some don't. But either way, you don't know anyone your future just because they regret your past. No one said anything for a while, just the sound of crackling logs. Then someone whispered, "That makes sense." And I knew Martha would have been proud. Angela and Mark never contacted me again after the petition failed. I don't know where they are now. I haven't looked. I'm not angry, but I'm not curious either. Some doors close because we slam them shut. Others close because we finally stop waiting for them to open. A few months ago, I sat with a young girl whose parents had just surrendered custody. She was 10, same age I was when I finally stopped wondering if they were coming back. She was trying not to cry, twisting the sleeve of her hoodie between her fingers like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. "Do you think I'm hard to love?" she asked me. I leaned forward. "No," I said. "I think you're hard to forget." Her eyes met mine, and something shifted. The way it once shifted in me when Linda said I didn't owe anyone a smile to deserve my space. The way it always shifts when someone finally believes they matter. Some people inherit money. Some inherit trauma. Some inherit both and still find a way to turn it into something beautiful. I didn't choose the beginning of my story, but I chose everything after. Have you chosen your own story, despite where you started? I want to hear about it. Drop your journey in the comments, and let's celebrate the families we build. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it helped you feel less alone. And remember, family is who shows up and stays.